My best friend attacked me because he loves my girlfriend and was jealous of her for me. Hi, I'm Mark. I'm 26 years old, and if you asked me to describe my life up until a few months ago, I'd have painted you a picture pretty close to perfect, at least in my eyes. I've managed to carve out a successful niche for myself in digital marketing, something I've always been passionate about. But beyond career achievements, the real highlight of my life has been my relationship with Daisy, my girlfriend of 5 years. She's not just my partner, she's my best friend, the one person who understands me completely without a word needing to be said. Daisy and I met back in college during a group project in a business class. We clicked instantly, and what started as a partnership over charts and presentations quickly blossomed into something deeper. Since then, we've been inseparable, navigating the challenges of early career hustles, apartment hunting, and everything in between. But it's not just been the two of us on this journey. Liam, my best friend since childhood, has been with us every step of the way. Liam and I go way back, to sandbox days to be exact. We attended the same elementary school, played on the same little league team, and spent countless afternoons at each other's houses. As we grew older, our interests diverged. I leaned into academics and eventually digital media, while he pursued engineering, but our friendship remained steadfast. It's one of those rare bonds that you read about in stories, where time and change don't seem to erode the foundation. When Daisy came into my life, I was a bit apprehensive about how she would gel with Liam. You hear those stories about best friends feeling ousted when significant others come into the picture, but with Liam, it was different. He welcomed Daisy with open arms, treating her like a sister from day one. They developed their own friendship, independent of me, which only strengthened the dynamic between us. Weekends were often spent together, exploring new restaurants or just binge-watching shows in someone's living room. We shared holidays, birthdays, and every significant event you can think of. Liam was more than just a friend. He was a cornerstone of what Daisy and I had built together. Liam, for his part, has always been the rock, the dependable, steady force in both our lives. He's the guy you call when you're moving apartments, because you know he'll show up, no questions asked, with pizza and beer to make the chore seem like a hangout. He's also the person I've leaned on during tough times, like when my dad was ill and I spent weeks shuttling between hospital visits and work deadlines. Liam was there, not just for me, but for Daisy too, helping out in little ways that made those dark days bearable. Over the years, our trio developed a rhythm, a comfortable routine filled with inside jokes, shared secrets, and mutual support. It's rare, to find such harmony in adult friendships, where life's complexities often pull people apart rather than together. Daisy and I, with Liam by our side, somehow found that sweet spot where everything just worked. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. Looking back, I realized there were signs, small, almost imperceptible cracks that began to appear in the facade of our perfect little world. I noticed moments when Liam seemed unusually quiet, his smiles a bit forced, especially when it was just the three of us. He'd be too eager to agree with anything Daisy said, even if it contradicted his own opinions. I brushed these things off as quirks. As the days turned into weeks, the shifts in Liam's behavior grew more pronounced, and it was becoming impossible to ignore. There were times when his usual lively banter would falter, replaced by periods of withdrawn silence that hung heavy in the air. He started to excuse himself early from our usual hangouts, citing tiredness or a heavy workload. But what really caught my attention was the way he looked at Daisy, those prolonged, intense stares that he thought went unnoticed. Initially, I brushed it off as him simply being protective, perhaps worried about something he wasn't ready to talk about. But the looks became more frequent, more lingering. It was during one of our Friday movie nights at our place when I really saw it, the way his eyes followed Daisy as she moved around the room, serving snacks. There was a certain intensity in his gaze that didn't sit right with me, a sharp deviation from his brotherly affection to something deeper, more covetous. Daisy didn't seem to notice, or if she did, she gave no indication. She was the same cheerful, outgoing person she always was, laughing at Liam's jokes and slapping him playfully on the arm when he teased her. But I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that something was off. One evening, after Daisy had gone to bed and Liam was about to leave, I decided to confront the issue. "Hey, Liam, got a minute?" I asked as I closed the door behind him, stopping him in his tracks. He turned, a hint of wariness in his eyes. "Sure, what's up?" I led him back into the living room, motioning for him to sit. "It's about you, man. I've noticed you've been a bit off lately. Is everything okay at work? Or is it something else?" I probed, keeping my tone light yet concerned. Liam shifted uncomfortably on the couch, his gaze avoiding mine. "Nah, it's nothing, really. Just the usual work stress. You know how it is," he replied, his voice a bit too casual. I wasn't convinced. It seems like more than that, Liam. You've been different. And I've noticed how you've been looking at Daisy, I added, deciding to lay it all out. The change in Liam was immediate. His face closed off, and he sat up straighter, a defensive edge creeping into his posture. What do you mean, looking at Daisy? He asked, his tone sharp. I sighed, running a hand through my hair. Come on, Liam. You know what I mean. It's like you're not even trying to hide it anymore. If there's something going on, you can talk to me. We've always been upfront with each other. Liam stood abruptly, his expression hardening. There's nothing to talk about, Mark. I think you're reading too much into things, he said stiffly. Am I, though? I challenged, standing to face him. Because it doesn't seem like nothing. It's not just how you look at her, but how you've been pulling away from us, too. Liam's jaw clenched, and he glanced toward the hallway, perhaps checking that Daisy hadn't come down. Lowering his voice, he leaned in close. Mark, just drop it, okay? It's nothing. I'm just tired, that's all. Don't make it into a big deal. But it was a big deal. His denial did nothing to ease the nagging doubts that had taken root in my mind. Liam left shortly after, the air between us charged with an unspoken tension that had never been there before. In the days that followed, his visits became less frequent. When he did show up, his interactions with Daisy were painfully forced, as if he was overcompensating for something. My attempts to talk to him were met with evasion or flat denials. It was clear that whatever Liam was feeling or going through, he wasn't ready to admit it. Not to me, not to anyone. And as his behavior grew more erratic, so did the atmosphere around us. What had once been easy and natural now felt strained and fraught with unspoken questions. A few weeks had passed since I noticed Liam's unsettling changes, and in an effort to reclaim some semblance of normalcy, Daisy and I decided to throw a small get-together at our apartment. It was meant to be a casual evening, just close friends, good food, and the kind of laughter that had become a bit too scarce in our lives lately. In the back of my mind, I harbored the hope that perhaps this night could smooth over the rough edges that had begun to form in my friendship with Liam. The evening kicked off well, with our apartment quickly filling with the buzz of conversations, clinking glasses, and background music blending into a lively symphony of a good night in progress. Liam arrived a bit later than everyone else, his smile a little forced, but he was immediately swept into the camaraderie. Daisy, ever the gracious host, welcomed him with a warmth that seemed to momentarily lift the cloud hanging over him. Watching them, a part of me wanted to believe that my earlier suspicions were just misinterpretations. As the night unfolded, Daisy flitted around the room, laughing and engaging with everyone, her energy infectious, her spirit a beacon in our home. Liam, meanwhile, mingled and made small talk, yet his glances often lingered on Daisy too long. I tried to shake off the discomfort creeping up my spine, focusing instead on entertaining our guests and keeping the vibe upbeat. Eventually, the evening wound down, and one by one, our friends began to depart, their departures marked by hugs and promises to meet up again soon. The apartment grew quieter, the aftermath of the party settling around us like a soft blanket. I was in the kitchen, gathering empty glasses and plates, when I realized that Daisy had gone to tidy up the living room and Liam was helping her. The clatter of the dishes in my hands drowned out their voices, but as I walked back into the living room, the scene before me brought a sudden stillness. Daisy was straightening the couch cushions, and Liam stood close to her, a seriousness etched across his features. They hadn't noticed my return, and I paused, watching, an uneasy feeling twisting in my gut. Suddenly, Liam's voice, low but intense, broke through the quiet. Daisy, there's something I need to tell you, he said, his eyes locked on hers. Daisy looked up, puzzled, a frown forming as she sensed the gravity in his tone. I should wait for Mark, she started, but Liam gently grabbed her arm, stopping her mid-sentence. No, I need to say this now, Daisy. It's about us, about how I feel. His voice was urgent, his grip on her arm tight. I stepped forward, my presence breaking the moment. Liam, what's going on here? My voice was sharp, a hard edge slicing through the tension. Both turned towards me, Daisy pulling her arm away from Liam. Her expression was one of confusion and concern. Liam looked like a man on the edge, his usual composure shattered. Mark, I'm sorry, but I can't hold this back anymore. I love Daisy. I've loved her for years, Liam confessed, the words tumbling out, raw and reckless. The room seemed to tilt, the walls closing in. What did you just say? My voice was a growl, disbelief and anger warring within me. Liam didn't flinch. You heard me, Mark. I'm in love with Daisy. I've been in love with her since the day I met her. I tried to ignore it, to push it away, but I can't anymore. Daisy's hands flew to her mouth, her eyes wide. Liam, I had no idea. I don't feel that way about you. I love Mark. The admission hung in the air, a painful truth laid bare. Liam's face crumpled, a mixture of hurt and desperation flickering across his features. Why would you do this, Liam? Why now? I demanded, my voice rising, each word laced with betrayal. I thought maybe she felt the same. I had to know, he stammered, his rationale feeble in the charged atmosphere. I shook my head, the action sharp, dismissive. You thought wrong. You've crossed a line, Liam. You need to leave. Now. Without another word, Liam turned and left, the door closing with a quiet click that echoed like a gunshot in the suddenly silent apartment. Daisy and I stood there, the weight of his confession settling around us like a heavy shroud. The rest of the night passed in a blur of hushed conversations and restless silences. Daisy and I tried to talk it out, to make sense of what had just happened, but the words felt hollow, inadequate. Liam's confession had irrevocably altered something fundamental in our relationship, in all our relationships. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I realized that the fractures Liam had created weren't just in his friendship with me. They were in the very foundation of the life Daisy and I had built together. The days following Liam's unexpected confession were some of the darkest I'd ever experienced. The shock of his declaration, combined with the vivid image of him grasping Daisy's arm, haunted both my waking moments and my dreams. Daisy and I tried to maintain normalcy, but the air between us had changed, charged with an invisible current that neither of us knew how to navigate. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to resolve things with Liam, not just for the sake of our past friendship, but for my own peace of mind. After several sleepless nights, I decided it was time to confront the situation head-on. I called Liam, my voice steady over the phone, masking the turmoil inside. Liam, we need to talk, face to face, I said firmly. There was a pause on the other end, a hesitation that spoke volumes about the gravity of our last encounter. Finally, Liam replied, his voice low. Okay, Mark, I'll come over, but not today. Let's meet tomorrow. I need some time to think. All right, tomorrow then, I agreed, the decision setting a somber tone for the next 24 hours. When Liam arrived at our house the following day, the tension was palpable. He looked worn, his eyes shadowed, and there was a tremor in his hands that he couldn't completely hide. As he entered, I noticed he avoided my eyes, focusing instead on some nondescript point behind me. Daisy, sensing the volatility of the situation, quietly excused herself, leaving us to hash things out alone. Liam, I started, my tone more controlled than I felt. We've got to sort this out. What you said the other night, man, it blindsided me, and it hurt Daisy too. Liam finally met my gaze, his eyes a mix of remorse and something darker, perhaps unresolved anger or desperation. I know, Mark. I'm sorry, truly. I shouldn't have said anything. I lost control. I thought I could handle these feelings, but seeing her every day, knowing I could never be with her, it's been eating me up inside. The raw honesty in his voice took me aback, but it didn't quell the storm of emotions brewing within me. Liam, you're my best friend, or at least, you were. You know how much Daisy means to me. How could you let this go on for so long without telling me? How could you think this would end? I don't know, Mark. I really don't, he whispered, his voice breaking. The room filled with a heavy silence, the weight of years of friendship pressing down on us both. The air was thick with tension, each second stretching longer than the last. I could see Liam's hands clench and unclench, a visible sign of his inner turmoil. I can't just turn my feelings off, Mark, but I know I've ruined everything. I've destroyed our friendship, haven't I? His voice was choked, laden with regret. As I watched him, a mix of pity and residual anger warring within me, something in his demeanor shifted. It was subtle, but it was like a shadow passed over his face, darkening his features. But you have to understand, Mark. I love her. I love her more than you ever could. His voice escalated suddenly, the words sharp and piercing. Liam, calm down. This isn't like you. I tried to interject, but it was too late. The floodgates had opened, and all the pent-up jealousy and frustration came pouring out. No, you don't get to tell me to calm down, Liam shouted, his face contorted with rage. Abruptly, he lunged toward the kitchen counter, his movements swift and alarming. Before I could fully register what was happening, he had grabbed a knife from the block. Liam, put the knife down, I yelled, my heart pounding as adrenaline surged through my veins. But he was beyond reason, driven by a destructive mix of love and despair. As he advanced towards me, knife in hand, instinct took over. I grabbed the nearest thing to me, a chair, and thrust it towards him, creating a barrier. The knife slashed down, catching the edge of the chair, sending splinters flying. We struggled, a chaotic tangle of limbs and raw, desperate energy. I was fighting not just for my safety, but for the friend I once knew, now lost to jealousy. The scuffle was brutal and brief. In a moment of sheer survival, I managed to wrestle the knife away, but not without sustaining a deep cut across my arm. The pain was sharp and immediate, blood blossoming across my shirt. Hearing the commotion, Daisy rushed in, her scream piercing the tense air. The sight of blood and the knife on the floor snapped Liam out of his frenzy. His face crumpled, realization dawning on him as he stared at his hands, now stained with my blood. Police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder as Daisy, trembling and crying, phoned for help. When the officers arrived, Liam didn't resist. He was arrested, a shell of the man he once was, led away in handcuffs. Sitting there, clutching my bleeding arm as the paramedics arrived, I watched as the police car drove away, taking with it a piece of my past that I knew would never be recovered. The betrayal was too deep, the wounds too raw. The weeks following Liam's arrest were a turbulent period, marked by a profound sense of upheaval and introspection. As the legal process unfolded, I found myself grappling with a spectrum of emotions that seemed to shift unpredictably: anger, betrayal, sorrow, and an overwhelming sense of loss. The man I had once considered a friend was now a stranger, his actions casting a long shadow over the fabric of my life. The trial was a public affirmation of Liam's guilt, but each hearing reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal. Sitting in the cold, austere courtroom, I watched as Liam, once vibrant and full of life, now appeared diminished, his posture slumped, his eyes hollow. He pleaded guilty to aggravated assault, a plea that spared him the harshest penalties, but did little to mitigate the emotional toll on all involved. Hearing him admit to his actions in a room full of strangers was both a relief and a knife twist to my already frayed nerves. Meanwhile, the physical scars from that night began to heal, the stitches removed, leaving behind a faint line that was a constant reminder of the betrayal. However, the emotional scars ran deeper, their edges jagged and raw. I struggled with flashbacks that would surge without warning, the sight of a kitchen knife, or the sound of raised voices enough to send my heart racing, a lingering panic that clouded my days and haunted my nights. Daisy, for her part, wrestled with her own turmoil. She was consumed by guilt, unjustly blaming herself for igniting the passion that led to Liam's breakdown. Despite my assurances that she was not responsible for Liam's choices, she couldn't shake the feeling that her presence had somehow catalyzed the catastrophic unraveling of our lives. Our relationship, once a source of strength and happiness, began to show signs of strain. Conversations that used to be filled with laughter and plans for the future were now tentative, often lapsing into silence. We were both walking on eggshells, each of us trying to shield the other from further pain while simultaneously coping with our own. The intimacy that had defined our connection seemed like a relic of a bygone era, replaced now by a cautious distance as we struggled to find our way back to each other. We sought counseling, both together and individually, attempting to untangle the complex web of emotions that the incident had wrought. These sessions were painful but necessary, exposing the raw edges of our feelings, but also providing a framework to begin the slow process of rebuilding. In therapy, I learned to articulate the sense of betrayal that haunted me, while Daisy worked through her misplaced guilt and the shadows of insecurity that Liam's actions had cast over her. At home, our apartment, once a sanctuary, felt different now. Each room seemed to echo with the remnants of the night that had changed everything. We talked about moving, about starting fresh in a new place that wasn't laden with memories of what we had lost. Yet, the decision to leave was fraught with its own set of anxieties, a tacit acknowledgement that we were running from ghosts that were as much internal as they were tied to our physical surroundings. As the trial concluded and Liam received his sentence, there was no sense of closure, only a deep, aching sorrow for the friendship lost and the innocence that could not be reclaimed. The judge's words, meant to deliver justice, felt hollow, echoing in the sterile air of the courtroom. In the aftermath, Daisy and I continued to navigate our altered reality. Some days, it felt like we were making progress, small moments of connection that reminded us of why we had fallen in love. Other days, the distance between us felt insurmountable, a chasm widened by trauma and mistrust. The balance was delicate, the future uncertain. Despite the challenges, we persisted, driven by a shared history and a deep, if bruised, love. Our journey was no longer about recapturing what was lost, but about discovering who we could become in the wake of our trials. It was a path marked not by the absence of pain, but by the presence of resilience, a testament to the complex, often messy tapestry of human relationships.